I was having a conversation with a guest on the channel on the podcast. And if you don't watch my podcast episodes, then definitely tune in. There's really great content and we have really great, deep, great chats with all the female guests that I bring on, and they were all great. But I was having a chat with her and she was telling me about how she came out of an abusive relationship a few years ago and how every guy since then that she's dated has been very toxic in one way or another. And that there was this one guy who treated her really well and really beautifully, but she just felt like he was a bit boring. She said she felt like she didn't feel that excitement as much, and so she ended things after about a month or two. But yet, the guys that she felt excitement for are the guys who would just pick her up, drop her down, the guys who would be really intense for a few days while they're being intimate, and then she wouldn't hear from him for like 2 weeks, and just basically treating her very poorly. And she was like, I don't understand why that is. And a big reason is because after talking with her, it became very evident that she had gotten into the cycle of experiencing the highs and then the lows. When you date someone who dates in a very toxic manner, it becomes like a drug addiction. When you get your hit with them, you are so high. Everything around you seems amazing. You're looking at the world with this new lens and you're having a great time. When you get your hit with them, you feel so high and it feels like everything is just euphoric. You start to think about all the potential together. You're having an almost infatuated, euphoric experience with them because you just love being around them and maybe you have insane chemistry. But then when the high comes down and you feel them being a bit distant, not being considerate, maybe they're not showing up for you in the way that you'd really like them to, you start having this withdrawal and it feels terrible. You don't feel great about yourself. It affects your self-esteem, brings low self-love a lot of the time. You don't see yourself to the degree that you should. And when drug addicts are having a low, having withdrawals, what are they doing? They're constantly chasing for that next hit. When you're with somebody in this toxic dynamic, it's exactly like a drug addiction. You have the roller coaster of highs and lows. And at one point, you're really, really high on top of the world and it feels great. And then when you crash down really low, you are really low. You being really, really high is when that person is messaging you, is when they're being very responsive, is when you're seeing them. That's the high. When you're feeling really low, that's when the person seems very distant from you. That's when you message them about how their day is going and they don't respond till the end of the day, maybe the next day, maybe the next day after that. That is when it feels very cold from them until they want something from you. And of course, when you're on a low, if somebody offers to give you that high again with that person, just like a drug addiction, we almost always try and take it. And so you get used to this cycle of highs and lows. And just like a drug addict, just because you have incredible highs, that doesn't mean that it's healthy for you. In fact, this dynamic is not healthy for you. And then what happens is if you are used to that, if you are used to getting that high, getting that hit, when you meet somebody who is healthy, when you meet someone who is in an emotionally stable place, somebody who wants to invest in you the way you would want to invest in them, someone who wants to build something with you and have a healthy relationship, that kind of high is not a roller coaster. It's a much, much slower, consistent, and steady incline. We're just inclining very slowly. And because of that, when you're used to the roller coaster of the high here and then the low, the healthy feels boring. In comparison to the quote unquote sparks, that infatuation, it feels boring in comparison. And that is normal. It will feel boring in comparison at first because you're not getting that high. Instead of getting high off a drug, what you're actually doing is you're training at the gym, you're eating clean, you're sleeping well, you're drinking plenty of water. You actually end up being way more healthier and happier by doing that as opposed to just getting that high. The high you get from being healthy isn't a spike like a drug. It's a curve. You're moving along, progressing slowly, and then there's a point where it all accumulates into great happiness and contentment. It takes you by surprise. You get to a certain point where you just realize, oh my goodness, when did I get here? That's exactly what it's like when you encounter someone who's looking for that healthy relationship. But you're so used to indulging in the cycle of getting that high hit from someone toxic and then crashing down low, you can neglect that. What happens in relationships, and we know this because we all know maybe one or two women in our life where they've gone from relationship to relationship to relationship to relationship. What happens in good relationships, it's as if you are slowly inclining, and eventually you just get to a point where you're so high and you're like, oh my goodness, I didn't even realize we were here. You get to a point where you just realize, like, I don't want to be without this person. And when I first met them, I wasn't actually that fussed about them. But now I don't want to be without them and they don't want to be without me. And that is the slow incline. That is how healthy foundation relationships are built over time. It can't be built on intense highs and then really harsh lows. And the reason the highs and the lows are so addictive like a drug is because when you get that hit, it reinforces all the beliefs and ideas that you had about the relationship potential with that said person. And because when you have a crash, you are constantly searching for it. So then the second that they give you a little bit, you grab onto it as tight as you can. And that maintains all the power that they have in this dynamic. So a lot of the time, if you are in that addictive cycle of getting a high and then a low with somebody who's actually quite toxic, but you can't help yourself, a lot of the time, it is because there is some healing that has to be done. Because people who are healthy are attracted to people who treat them well, who want to treat them well. People who are not operating from a healthy place, people who need healing, are only looking at the physical chemistry, are only looking at the confidence of the person, are only looking at how this person makes them feel in those short burst moments. But when we operate from a healthy place, it doesn't matter how attractive the guy is, how successful he is, how charming he is. People who are looking for a healthy relationship are asking the questions, does this person make me feel secure? Does this person make me feel safe? Does this person make me feel seen, make me feel heard? Women who are ready for healthy relationships, a guy who treats them right makes him more attractive to her. And the guy who doesn't treat her well, isn't consistent and isn't considerate, and makes the guy less attracted to her. I want you to think of it this way. Let's say you have a rating of 100, right? And let's say for you to have attraction to a man and want to spend more time with him, let's say the rating of 80 is the pass mark. Now, take a woman operating from a healthy space and she meets her guy. Initially, on first look and vibe, he may be a 70 out of 10. So then he hasn't crossed that threshold yet. But then he treats her really well. He gives her proper investment. He's very integral with her. That then adds 20 attraction points. So now he's gone from a 70 to a 90. And now this is the kind of man that she wants to choose. Equally, let's say she meets a man and he starts at an 85 out of 100. So he's already passed the mark. But the way he handles his level of investment with her, his consideration, his respect for her is quite low and quite poor. He's not consistent. That makes him less attracted to her. So though he started at an 85, now maybe he's gone down to a 65, which means in that case, this is somebody who she no longer wants to invest in or choose. This is someone who she is no longer drawn to because his treatment of her has made him appear unattractive. That's what it's like for someone who's ready for a healthy relationship and has done the inner work and healing in themselves. Whereas somebody who hasn't done the inner healing and work yet, somebody who does need to heal, what that looks like is they meet somebody and let's say he's a 90 out of 10 on the initial impression and vibe. However, he treats her quite poorly. But even though he treats her poorly, instead of him going from a 90 down to maybe a 70, in which this person shouldn't be drawn to that person anymore, in which you shouldn't be drawn to that person anymore, what actually happens is that woman goes, okay, he does treat me poorly, but remember he is a 90 out of 100, so I'm gonna stay. And then when he treats them great, that still adds to the 90 that she sees it. And then when he treats her great, that then adds to the 90 that she already sees him as. It adds a 20 points, so then it goes from a 90 to maybe 110 out of 100. And then that's where that hit comes from. That's why it seems almost euphoric. It's that hit of the person choosing us for that short period of time. And the reason it's only short is because they only want one thing. And that hit is so strong and it becomes so addictive, we fall into this cycle. So not only do we congratulate them and give them credit when they actually treat us the way we should be for those short, intense periods, which makes us want them more, but then when they don't treat us right, we're not subtracting from their overall attractiveness to us. Now, if you do find that's the case for you, that's an indicator that there's some healing that still needs to be done. And you're not ready for a healthy relationship. Because when someone healthy who is ready for a great relationship comes into your life, they're going to seem boring to you. They're going to seem unexciting to you. People who are healthy and ready for healthy relationships, the treatment that someone gives them makes that person more attractive. If someone's investment in you, if somebody's giving you the right treatment doesn't make them more attractive, then there's some inner work to be done. And you're not likely actually looking for the right qualities for what a healthy relationship would require. Now, don't get me wrong. That's not me saying that any guy who you don't find desirable can then suddenly become desirable just because he treats you well. You may meet a guy who may be on your rating for desirability at, let's say, 50 out of 100, he treats you really well, and then maybe he goes from a 50 to a 70, but that doesn't mean he reached 80, which means that doesn't mean you're necessarily drawn to him because he hasn't reached that threshold. But how a man treats you should 100% impact how attractive you see him. Hey, Kit here. I want to invite you into the Kit Angels community. Don't know what that is? Have a look for yourself. It might be something you want.